All right. Well, it looks like we're live. So, welcome everybody to another episode of the Deitz Playbook. I know that it is about 7:21 right now. Normally, we start at 7 p.m. on the money, but today there's a little bit of hecticness that we had to deal with personally for me. So, I'd like to apologize for that. But there's a piece of the puzzle that we're going to put together today with John, who I'll bring up on the screen here in a minute. That I pick these points every week, kind of based off of what I'm seeing and what I think people need help with and we need to talk about. Um, there was a couple of people that submitted questions this week, so thank you. As we did last week, what I think we're going to do again this week is talk about those questions that people submitted in between the different points that we talk about. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mr. John Deitz to the screen. He's actually in the office with me here, but in order to keep 6 feet away from each other, we're kind of sitting on the opposite room. So if you see me kind of looking off to the side here, it's because I'm taking a peek at John. Or if I'm looking up at the screen, he's also on my screen. So John, thank you for stopping by the office today, my friend.
Good to be here again.
All right. So this week's points. So I titled this one the when the oxygen mask drops, put it on yourself first. That's also the first point that we're going to discuss. But I titled this because this week I had a conversation with somebody that looked at me and said, my spine is breaking. Basically, I'm carrying all of this weight. I can't take it anymore. I'm starting to feel depressed again. And it was all because they pretty much refused to take care of themselves at all. They were so focused on taking care of other people that they themselves were hurting. And so that's how I interpreted this line, but I'm genuinely curious, and I'm going to turn the floor over to John on this first one about how, where that line came from and what kind of advice he can give to you guys based off of if the oxygen mask drops, put it on yourself first.
Well, and I'm to be very honest, I forget where I heard that, but it was profound enough that I never forgot it. And the bottom line is this: it's simple to what your guy just said. If you are under a load, if the oxygen if the oxygen mask drops, you put it on yourself first because you are of no value to the people close to you if you as well cannot breathe. So on an airplane, that is actual literal. It's also a metaphor to what your person said. If you're not taking care of you, once you grind down and once you can't go anymore, I have a friend of mine, his name's Kevin Warren. He's the commissioner of the Big Ten. He works out vigorously every day without question. And I said to him one time, wow, I mean, you really get after it every day. And he said, I have a lot of people depend on me to be at my best. And so he does it for him, but he does it for his family, the people he works with, everybody that counts on his decision making. He wants to be in peak performance so he can do the best to be responsible for what his job title is and what he's supposed to be. And so if you find yourself in a position where you need to do something for others, it's imperative that you take care of you first, not in a selfish way, but in a responsible way of saying, listen, I have to be at my best so my kids get to eat, so my, mom's rent gets paid, so that other people get to take a paycheck home and take care of themselves and their families. And so it's absolutely critical that you take care of you first. Again, not in a greedy, selfish way, but in a very responsible, fiduciary way that you have to make sure you take care of who you take care of best.
Yeah. I think that I hear this, and for full disclosure, I mean, I won't give away the person's name because I feel like that conversation was kind of in confidence, but it was a nurse that was having a conversation with me. I think that that's something that I was curious. I was excited for you to come in because you had that perspective of the fireman. And I think that people that are first responders, whether they're police, they're fire, or they're in the medical field, nurses, doctors, even nurse aides, respiratory therapists, anybody that's in that field, do you remember, like, as a fireman, and then I definitely know as an ICU nurse, carrying some of that emotional burden, and then how, if you were talking to a first responder, how would you recommend they try to mitigate that weight that we tend to take home with us based on the situations that we see on a daily basis?
Well, two things. I mean, one thing, you have to make sure that you're doing the best you can, but only as good as you can. 110% sounds great as a cliche, but usually everybody can only give 100%. Frankly, most people don't. Frankly, most people don't really understand what 100% is. But if you're a first responder, if you're anybody, you just have to do the best you can, but there's a certain point you got to let it go. I mean, there's only so much I can do, because again, you grind yourself down trying to take care of everything, and sooner or later you run out of gas, and then what happens to everybody else? They're left flat-footed too, and they have nothing to do to help themselves. So you have to do the best you can. You have to do what you can, and then after that, that's when you have to hand it off to somebody else and say, you got to pick up your end. Which is another great point, is you have to make sure that when you're helping, you're doing what you can, that everybody else is helping too, because there's a lot of people, I hate to say this, but there's a lot of people that will just sit back and let you work, let you take care of them, let you do whatever it is you do, and you're busting ass trying to make sure you're getting it all done. And people are just like, that's cool. Can you get this done too? Can you get that done too? And some people will manipulate you. They'll guilt you into things. There's a myriad of ways. But the point of it is, you do the best you can to last as long as you can. Just like a marathon runner. Marathon runners do not sprint. They run at a certain pace, whatever the pace is. All of them faster than me, I can promise you. But you're doing the pace as fast as you can, and you do your thing. But if you try to sprint that, you're not going to hit the miles. And that's just how it is. And so you have to be, there's a term I use called, you got to be smarter than yourself. And you have to understand there's only so much you can do. Once you hit that point, do it. And then you got to let it go, or you got to hand it off, or you got to ask for help, or whatever. But, unfortunately, we really don't have S's on our chest. We can't be Superman or Superwoman. Right. We have to just do the best we can. And the best we can has got to be good enough.
Yeah. We'll go into one of the questions, and this one was asked by a gentleman named Jason. And so Jason asked, out of all the different leadership skills, John, that you have developed over the years, which one do you feel was the most difficult to develop, or the one that you grappled with the hardest?
I would say humility in control leadership, which means there's so many times if you find yourself in a leadership role and you have a lot of power to get something done, you expect people to snap to and get it done and go and finish up. And, did you hit the deadline? Did you hit the number? Because we got to make sure we get this kind of. And there comes a point, and I think this is part of aging. There comes a point where you go, listen, I didn't take into consideration. You had a child at home that needed your help. You had a wife that was homesick. You had, there again, a myriad of reasons. There comes a point where it's got to be like, you have to be able to be in a controlled chaos. Right. So you have to get stuff done. Okay, it's business, it's responsibilities, it's whatever. You've got to get stuff done. But there's also a level of compassion and understanding that has to be built into the fabric of the whole process, or else you too can hurt feelings, burn people out, do whatever. And so there's a real level of grace understanding, compassion that has to come with, because just, here's what I say all the time: just because you find yourself in a leadership position does not make you a leader. It takes people a long time, and very few people are really good leaders. There's very few people that are good leaders. But for those that are, one of the things is what, Jason's question is. You have to make sure, in my case, you have to make sure, and I don't care if it's raising my daughters, I don't care if it's conversation with my wife, I don't care if it's employees that you're giving direction to. You have to do it with, you have to measure your words, you have to be tempered, you have to be kind as possible. Mm-hmm. And like I said too, there was times when people had to be terminated. And it was imperative to me as, if that day ever comes, you do it with as much grace and gentleness as you possibly can. The end result is still, they're gone, but you have to leave as much dignity in place and be as kind and understanding, because they're going home to tell somebody, hey, I don't have a job anymore. Mm. And I did something or some things to cause it to happen. And there's a level of compassion that really needs to be employed in those conversations as they're making their way out the door. So anyway, I guess to answer his question, that the thing that was the toughest is to understand that there's far more to leadership than just, leading with determination. You got to lead with determination, but with some grace and compassion, and that kind of thing as well.
Yeah, I know that one of the points that we talked about very early on in this series, like when COVID first started, and then one of the first Spartans of Kindness blog posts that we posted back when I think we were still, were we Apex yet at the time?
Yeah, I think it was Apex. I think it was just in the very beginning of it, but nonetheless.
Yeah, we may have just, because we had just switched, because I had the extra apartment room. And right. That's where we did our first interview. Yeah. But one of those Spartans of Kindness blogs was the kind is free. Where it only takes 7 to 12 seconds. And why don't we just hit that a little bit, like the power of kindness in leadership, since we're kind of in that realm. I think that people that are listening to this can really get a lot from understanding how powerful kindness can be over dictatorialness.
Yeah,
when it comes to leadership.
It is, because so many people, they've got roughed up along the way, and so when they finally get in a position of power, they want to show everybody, flex up and show everybody, I'm in charge and you'll do what I say and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And there was a gentleman that I knew some years ago. Actually, I didn't know him very well. I only met him a couple times. But his name was John Powers. He was the former chairman of Pfizer Pharmaceutical. And he said to me, John, the power is in the servant. Mm. I'd love to. I wish so bad I would have made that up myself, but I didn't. The power is in the servant. Mm. And as I continued to ponder that from that day and on as years went by, I really found it to be true. If you're kind and you are the servant, which means when you come up to somebody, you go, hey, the floor is dirty. And the guy goes, well, because my broom is about wore out. Mm. Well, the servant goes and gets him a new broom. If you say you didn't get these orders filled out in time, they say, well, because I ran out of ink in the printer and I don't have any good pencils. Well, a good servant is going to go and make sure that we have plenty of ink and plenty, instead of passing that by and saying, well, you should get it yourself, or go, well, I don't understand, or you're going to be in trouble for, wait a minute. Let me see how I can help. Yeah. I heard one time about Sam Walton. He was down there when Sam's Club was over off Dressler. A truck came in. Sam Walton owned Sam's Clubs, owned Walmart. He got in the truck and helped him unload the truck. He was all power, almighty, but he wasn't too strong or too powerful to get a roll of his sleeves and to help him unload the truck. And so at the end of the day, I think there's great value in the power of the servant. And so with that kind of spun off the whole kindness thing from my vantage point. And I just think that you just get far more done, especially not only in the immediate, but in the long run, because if you don't have some, you don't want people grumbling and hating on you, because I believe very much in Mickey Mouse's theory on you whistle while you work. If you have happy employees, if you have happy people, instead of them, hating you or hating their boss or hating whomever, they can just be happy. Here's the secret to that. Then they go home happy, and they have a better chance of having a good, fun, quiet, enjoyable evening with their family or whatever it is they do. And then they have a better chance of getting a decent night's rest, and they have a better chance of coming back to you in the morning more productive, still happy, looking forward to a good day, and it starts to gain momentum, and you start getting more out of that employee. And not every day. Some days they stub their toes. Some days they don't feel good. Some days they got the flu coming on. But over the term, you end up with more people getting more work because they're more content and they enjoy coming to work and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just think that there's tremendous value, and if we can step aside from leadership and that for a minute, just to be a good neighbor. You see somebody struggling with an old couple struggling with a walker. It's easy for you to just go fold the walker up and set it in the car for them, help them get in, and away they go. It took so few minutes. Actually, it takes usually seconds to do that. It changed their entire day. It took nothing out of your day, but the fact that you were kind and helpful. And then here's the other thing. Then you feel good about what you did.
Right.
Even if you tell no one, you feel good about it. You feel a bit empowered, the fact he was able to help somebody that was in need. And so here's where the Superman comes back into play. You get your vehicle and you go, you know what? I did a good thing. I didn't fly in from on top of a building. I didn't stop a train. But you know what? To those people, that was an amazing thing to be able to help them with. And so it's one little kind deed at a time. It just makes you better, the people around you better, and your life better, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that, so that kind of leverages into the next point, and then we'll address another submitted question after this one. So for those of you that are just tuning in, I'd like to welcome you to the Deitz Playbook here with Mr. John Deitz. I'm Jan Almasy, and tonight we're talking about different topics kind of surrounding how to deal with some of the stress of taking care of other people, taking care of yourself, and ways that you can kind of engage yourself to become the best version of yourself that you can possibly be. So the second point is, you're the average of the 5 people that you surround yourself with the most. Choose them carefully.
There again, I heard that. I don't know where I heard it from, but I heard it, and it really makes a lot of sense. So let's say you run around with, it almost goes back to the birds of a feather flock together kind of thing.
Okay.
If the kind of people you surround yourself with is kind of who you are. And if you want to be a better person, be around kinder, gentler, work ethic oriented, hardworking, good, kind, all that stuff, people. If you don't, then you're around people that are some kind of a savory character that just isn't, and you find yourself running in, it's like running in groups or running in packs. All of a sudden now you go, I'm not really capable of doing what they want to do, whatever sinister thing they're into. And it's the same thing with just like argumentative, fighting, things that just cause unrest. I mean, you don't have to do bad criminal activity. You just around people that are bringing you down. They have different ideas of what you'd prefer to be, and so you start isolating or identifying, not isolating. You start identifying people that you want to be like,
right? And
then should you find a way to become friends enough to where they're friend / mentor, then all of a sudden you go, oh, I see. I have a very good, probably the best friend I've ever had in my life. His name's Phil. One time Phil and I were going someplace, and he was like, he didn't care. If you wanted to go to Burger King and I wanted to go to Wendy's, let's go to both. if we're going to rent a car, if you want to pick the black Navigator and he wants he'd go, "No, let's just get the Navigator. That's fine." He was so easy to get along with, so kind. He always, I bet I knew him for a year before I was able to hold a door for him. He always held the door for him. He's just a kind, just a great person.
A gentle soul.
Yeah. Right. And so, okay, so you happen to get one of those. And then you find another guy that's pretty good the same way too, and happens to be successful in business also, and happens to be a good parent or a good, and so then, and sooner or later, if you get the right nucleus of people around you, you can't help but to start becoming a bit more like them.
Right.
Because you ever seen, good friends or boyfriend and girlfriend, or husband and wife, sometimes they can finish each other's sentence for them, or they'll have the same kind of verbiage or in their thing because they've been around each other so much, they start to sound a little bit alike.
Yeah, the same wavelength. That's what my little brother always says.
And so what happens is if you happen to find yourself around 5 great people, you can learn a lot from that, and you end up becoming a better person. If you happen to find yourself running consistently with 5 people that aren't great, then you can't help but be drugged backwards into that cesspool as well. And so all of a sudden you're going, well, I never thought that I would do that, but I did. I never thought I would say that to someone, but I did. And it almost goes back to what you reap, you sow. It almost goes back to karma. It goes back to what goes around comes around. It's kind of like whatever you do consistently, it's coming back around, good or bad. And usually it's more than you get. Usually if you do got a lot of good, you get a lot of good back. And vice versa. If you do you do bad, you usually get a lot more bad back too.
Right.
And so anyway, that's my
that energy that you put out. My dad always says input equals output, regardless of whether it's music or the books that you're reading or the newspapers that you have or the friends that you surround yourself with or the actions that you commit on a daily basis, right? I forget how the exact quote goes, but I think it's something around like your thoughts becomes actions, your actions become your character. I think that's kind of like the trisomy that they talk about, and I really abide to that, where you have input. If you're listening to music that consistently degrades women, for example, right, and that is what your input is consistently, and then you frequent locations that kind of add to that degradation, and now you're starting to have thoughts over and over and over again about this type of music, or this act is acceptable, I'm listening to this is kind of happening. Those thoughts end up becoming your actions, and if you commit the same action consistently over and over and over again, that ends up becoming associated with who you are as a person, which is your character.
Yeah.
And that could be a very upsetting realization to a lot of people. And I see Jordan, I'd like to say hi to you, and Alexander, hello to you. I know that both of you guys have been kind of engaging with us over the last couple of weeks. You get onto these points where you almost wake up and you look at yourself in the mirror, and like you just said, wow, I never thought that I would do that, but I did. Or I never thought that I would say that to somebody else, but I did. And so in that context, John, if you're that person, or there's a person that's watching this right now that's going through that realization right now, that OS moment, when they're looking at themselves in the mirror saying, how did I become this person? How would they go about rebuilding?
Well, that's like we talked about a time or two ago. There comes a point where you need to make a list, either literally or in your mind, of what you want to become, what you want to be. And then you identify people around you that are doing that. And it doesn't have to necessarily, if you want to make a lot of money, you don't necessarily have to go after, the nearest real estate agent or the nearest, CEO or whatever. But you have to put yourself in a position of being around people. And so the point is, if there are people that are taking you down, you have to just cut them out of your life. And so you just have to start finding people around you and doing, being do whatever it is you can do, be whatever you can be, to just be more of what you want. And whatever it is that is, that's usually better in your view. But you just have to just try to learn from people and try to make sure you get better by your surroundings.
Yeah. I want to give a plug. I know Alexander Kowalski is watching right now. Kamlowski is watching right now, and something that he's messaged in the past into the stream has been, if me and you would be willing to talk about Marcus Aurelius and some of the Stoic philosophy.
I don't know.
So I think that you would really enjoy Marcus Aurelius. So he was a Roman emperor, and his entire thing was Stoic philosophy. So Stoicism is really like a collection of a man who is self-aware of his emotions and how they affect his decision-making is a man that's empowered. And that if you can understand why you feel certain things, that you can, like, be kind to an aggressor. He talks about that type of thing. How can you mentally deal with the fact that you're supposed to try to be kind to someone that's being aggressive? And he puts it into, like, a philosophical construct. So maybe we can have a conversation about it. I know that's something that our listeners submitted as a potential thing, because the way the conversation went essentially, John, is that the way that you talk about things is like a modern day Marcus Aurelius.
Okay.
Right. And so that you bring this super, super interesting in-depth perspective to seemingly superficial lines.
Yeah.
You know, some of the quotes or cliches that people have heard for a long time, you bring this extra layer of depth to.
Well, I'll tell you one thing about that has mattered in my life. And I don't want to Bible up on you too heavy, but the Bible says if you're kind to your enemies, it's like putting heaps of hot coals on their head. And I have found that to be true over and over and over again in my life. Where instead, the natural thing is somebody punches you in the nose, you're going to punch them in the nose back. Somebody kicks you in the chin, you want to kick them in the chin back. But in my life, I've found, and I've done some of that. I'm not saying I'm above whatever, but I've done some of that. But what I've found is, the kinder you can be to your enemies, number one, you carry no guilt then.
Right.
You don't carry that burden any further. They might, but you don't. And so it's hard. The Bible also said, a kind word turneth away wrath. Well, if you're kind to people, it's really hard for people to be real mean back to you. I'm not saying they don't, but sometimes they do. It's really hard. And so when you are kind to your enemies, number one, like I said, it puts it back on them. And then instead of going, that guy mother after me and that guy spit in my face and that guy whatever, it's kind of hard to scream too loud when you go, you know what that guy did? He helped me back up. He helped me brush off my pants. Mm-hmm. He held the door for me when I was going through the, it's and in the end, at least you don't have that burden of guilt, of retribution, of all that stuff. You just, in my life, I just found out that it never hurts to just be as kind as you can.
Yeah.
So when I say you can, you still have to protect your family.
Yep.
At whatever means. You still have to defend yourself. You have to make sure nobody cheats your bank account. Somebody to steal your bank account, and you go, oh well, maybe I can make it back. That's not the case. Then you got to go through the legal change. You got to go through whatever you got to do to make sure that you protect yourself that way. So I'm not saying just lay down and take it.
Right.
I'm just saying be as kind as you can when you can. And then, but there's also that guy out there that still has to be, defended against by whatever means. So,
yeah, no, I think that. So for those of you that are just tuning in, I know that we just had. I just saw the numbers switch. A pretty decent buzz there. So, Doug Frank, I'd like to say hi to you because he was actually one of my commanders on base at one point. And so I hope you're doing well, Colonel Frank. I appreciate you stopping by. Alexander's commenting here. He says, yay for a conversation about Stoicism. The Apostle Paul met with the Stoics and had a big influence on Christian thought. Love the tie-in. So, Alexander, thanks for having those conversations and bringing that up so that we could pop it up on the show here. I never knew that the Apostle Paul was influenced by Stoic philosophy. That makes a lot of sense, though, because I feel like the Apostle Paul talks about a lot of things that align with the way that the Stoics kind of preach their message. And then Bob Blank here says, set your goals in life and surround yourself with people that influence you positively, and then you can also influence people that can look up to you and vice versa. I think that that's super important, like understanding that not only do you look up to people, but we almost always exist on a spectrum. So there's always somebody watching you. Like right now, I know a big priority in my life is being an example for my little brother. Right? Because he's working for me, he's about to start school, he's trying to figure out where he fits in life, he's 18. And so I know that we work together intimately on a daily basis. He's my producer. So every interaction with a customer, every time I'm getting frustrated with a customer and he's watching how I handle it. But then I also, like John, you're sitting in the room right now, you're one of the people that I look up to as a mentor. And then there's a whole bunch of other people above me on the spectrum, like even Colonel Frank that just popped in here. He was a huge mentor of mine on base, and he gave me a bunch of advice. So I'm looking up to a group of people. There's also a group of people looking up to me. So you exist on this spectrum that, like Bob said, you're surrounding yourself with people that you can look up to, and vice versa. So do you have anything in there as far as like interactions that you've had in your life existing in that leadership spectrum, or maybe like a leader that you would think actually, here's a good question. Has there been a time where there's been a leader that you felt that you looked up to and then came to realize that they actually looked up to you?
I don't know that that's ever been the case in my life, maybe, but there's been guys that I looked up to that have turned out to be incredibly disappointing when you really got to know them intimately. And there's guys that I've looked up to that turned out to be just great people. So, but I don't know that anybody ever really like turned it around and, admired me back. It was just a matter of, but I've learned a lot from a lot of people, good and bad. So.
Yeah, I know that, like, I think people always base their perception of happiness on certain things. And where I think that Bob may be kind of going here with this, like looking up on this spectrum, might be a good time to kind of address that you are the one that determines what your happiness level is and what will make you happy.
No question.
And so if you, like, I know that there's a story that you always tell about, the CEO that, you are looking at this person that has a lot of money and they're unhappy and you're the happiest man in the world.
Right.
Expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, there was somebody one time that lashed out at me and said, you hate me because I'm rich. And I said, I have no ill will to you because you're rich, because I'm richer than you. I'm the richest person I know. And I am. I'm the richest person I know. And it has little to do with money. It has a lot to do with the relationships I have in my life, the love I have for my wife, the love I have for my daughters, the happiness I have in where where we live, and the social structure I found myself in, the friends I have. And so that's why I'm never intimidated to walk into a room with, people that are supposedly, big shots or wealthy or whatever.
Right.
Because, here's what I've come to find. Most of the time, if you get to know somebody, you find out they have some equalizer in there that no matter how much fame or fortune they may appear to have, there's also an equal negative in their life that you go, I wouldn't want to be a part of that for anything.
Right.
And so there's but there's a balance, The vehicle I drive is nice enough. The house I live in is nice enough. So it's just like the balance you come up with. But most importantly is how you, in my opinion, how you are able to structure your time
Right.
to be able to have the time you need in life. Because time's going fast. We talked about that before.
Yep.
Time's going so fast. And so how you can structure your time, you can balance everything to be a good friend, husband, wife, father, mother, daughter, so whatever it is. And it takes a really important amount of balance. And I think the main part is the balance. And it's a little bit like we started the conversation with the oxygen mask. If you're not at your best, you can't help other people be their best.
Right.
And so you need to make sure you're best. And if that's enough rest at night, if that's enough quiet time in the evening, whatever. And so just like my friend Jan, he burns a candle at both ends. And somebody needs to trip him maybe to calm down on working from 6 o'clock at night or 6 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Sooner or later you run out of gas. And so that's what you need to do is just try to find, and everybody's balance is different. You just got to try to find your balance, and with that balance, I believe that's where happiness comes. There's a friend of mine that just told me several years ago. I said, "Are you happy?" And he said, "Happiness isn't a big priority in my life." I said, "Okay, it should be. I wish that for you. It should be."
That's really
and so
troubling.
So just recently he called me and said, something I need to tell you about. I said, all right, what is it? He said, I didn't realize how unhappy I was until I realized now how happy I am. And so now all of a sudden, what he didn't put much value in years ago is becoming an incredibly high priority to him now.
Right.
And so, but it's about whatever it takes, whatever you have to put into your life or cut out of your life to get yourself that kind of balance. And I believe in that with all my heart.
Yeah. No, I don't have anything to add to that. That's important. So I'm gonna ask another listener question here, because I think that answering your guys' question is more my priority on this show for sure. So Chad mentioned he must have seen the question about being micromanaged that we answered last week.
Yeah.
And he said, John, my boss is telling me that I need to be more strategic. He doesn't offer any more explanation. And he says that he's a welder. How can I be more strategic in a job that is task oriented? So I'm guessing, there's not a whole lot more context there, but I'm guessing that, that he's in a position where it's just kind of go do, this number of welds or do this kind of thing.
Well, there you go, not knowing him or his boss.
Right.
But and I don't want to pick on bosses because they're really important. But there again, if your boss is going to make that kind of to any boss or father, I spend a lot of time. I love being a father. If you're going to make a comment like that, then I think that whoever you made that comment to is owed or is deserving of a detailed explanation.
Right.
So if he says you need to be more anything, you go, perfect. I'll be glad to do my best. Tell me how you want me to go about that. Tell me, because it's easy to say, something like that, and then all of a sudden, I don't know what you mean.
Right.
And so, but on the other hand, he has to make sure, who'd you say it was, Chad?
Yeah, Chad.
Chad has to make sure that he's truly out there giving it his best or, as best he can. Right. Because maybe the boss is saying, well, it's running a little slow here. And here's the other thing, too, I want to add. When you're not getting everything done your boss wants you to do, it's critical for you to it's called communication skills. You have to say, let me tell you something, boss. I'd love to do more, but you haven't given me enough of whatever. Chad might not have a powerful enough welder. He might not have the right welding, sticks or wire or however he's welding. If he's MIG, TIG, arc welding. I don't know what he is, but there's a chance that his boss, which goes back to the power of the servant, maybe his boss or the company isn't giving him the tools to advance better.
Yeah.
And so if that's the case, he needs to make sure his boss knows, listen, I'd love to do more, but I'm tired of laying here on this mud when I'm out there welding the pipeline. If you could give me some kind of a pallet to lay on, I could probably be a little bit more efficient. And so a lot of that comes back to the communication skills of just going, hey, okay, I'll try to do more. I'll try to do better. However, but here's where my stumbling blocks are. Mm-hmm. And then and then if everybody's being honest and no boss is trying to bully, they're trying to be a servant, not a bully, then all of a sudden things start working out better because power's in the servant. You need a pallet. Let me make sure I get your pallet. Yeah. You need, so and on and on and on. And so that's the big thing I would say to him is make sure he's being honest. Chad, make sure he's being honest with his boss about all the details of why he's coming up short, and go from there.
Yeah, I think Chad, like John said, without a whole lot of context, I can't give a whole bunch of very specific advice on this situation. But I will kind of give a piece of advice to Chad, and then also anybody that's listening that's a middle manager, right? Because I spent the last 3 years of my Air Force career as either a staff sergeant or a tech sergeant, so as an NCO. And that middle management position, Alexander commented, he just is excited about the fact that we're talking about servant leadership.
Right.
So I think that as a middle manager, and John hit on it with the bosses, if you're that upper level boss or an officer or whatever, your job is to try to equip the troop to be able to get the job done. Because if they can't get it done, it reflects poorly on you. If they do get it done, it reflects positively on the entire unit. And that's what you have to kind of get over. So what I would really focus on is if you're that middle manager, it's tough sometimes, but you have to be the advocate for your crew. If the bosses are not providing the pallets for your crew to sleep on because, they're just being the bosses, don't just assume that they're doing it out of malice. It might be something that they don't see, and you have to bring it up to them. But then also, if they're pushing back, sometimes being that mid-level manager or being that person that's in that middle position is being the person that's willing to put their foot in the ground and draw a line in the sand and say, no, if you want us to get this job done, we need this. Whether if it's a safety issue, if it's something major, one of your responsibilities as a middle manager is to fight back a little bit. So you have to do it tactfully, right? You can't just say, boss, you're a dick. Give us this stuff because it may not be feasible in the finances or whatever, but at least ask them to tell you why so you can explain that to your employees. Because if they're getting disconnected and the production starts getting bad at that tier, they're really the lifeblood of the company. If they're not doing their job and doing their job well, things are going to get weird. And then it puts pressure on you as the mid-level manager, and then in turn puts pressure on the leadership to perform because they have responsibilities, whether it's to stockholders or it's to the board or it's to whoever. Everybody's feeling a different type of stress, but if you can be that mid-level manager that kind of takes a step up and says, hey, if you want us to be more strategic or you want us to be more efficient, tell me, and then I can delegate that out. It's kind of just been my experience, at least in kind of that mid-level management realm, has been it's a delicate balance between yes, sir, and service could be done better.
And where I work, I know it's not the same for everybody, but my boss gives me 1 month work in advance, and then he leaves me alone. There's never been a time I didn't finish the job by the end of the month. One time, I finished it at 2:00 on the 28th of February, but I got it done. But the point is if you want that kind of freedom on your job and you want to be more strategic, ask them to give you the freedom to do that. And in my case, I would juggle weather versus temperature versus, rain, snow, time of year, and have to figure it all out to make sure you got everything done on time. But there was a level of freedom and trust that, he would give me the work and say nothing else about it until the work was done. And then,
but if you're a newer manager, I think, and I'm giving this because I've done this and I've been through it, and because I was a fresh staff sergeant and a little bit of a jackwagon. You cannot expect, even though it would make the team more efficient, you cannot expect that level of freedom right off the money. You have to earn that. Like, you have to, they may micromanage you a little bit at first, and you have to be kind of okay with that for a little while until they trust you. And sometimes they are just a micromanager at core, and then 2 years later, if you've been consistently performing positively and they're still micromanaging, maybe it's time to give them a little flick. But
can I give you an objection?
Yeah, shoot.
Because for your bosses, your managers, there's only so many hours in their day as well.
Yep.
If something happens, they realize they don't need to watch you either very little or at all. That just freed up whatever time that they were using. And so a lot of this stuff, the responsibility comes back to the employee and how hard you want to work or how efficient you want to work or whatever. And if you need babysat, then most of the time people will babysit you. But if time after time you keep getting it done, it's like, well, I don't even need to watch that guy. I'll just see what happens at the end of the week or the end of the month or whatever the break points are. And then all of a sudden, you find yourself having a little bit more freedom, which comes from trust that you're doing. And when something goes wrong, you tell the truth about what went wrong. You don't make something up. You go, listen, you want the truth? I'll tell you the truth. And like I used to tell my kids all the time, it's not that you spilled the grape juice on the white carpet. That's an accident. It's that you slid the ottoman over it and didn't tell anybody about it.
Yeah.
That's the deception.
Yep.
Where if you just come and go, hey, I hate to tell you this, but I just spilled a bunch of grape juice on the white carpet. You go, okay, that sucks. I'm not happy about it, but we can clean it up. We can replace whatever. But when they realize there's a deception there,
right,
that changed everything. And so at the end of the day, the trust is paramount. You got to be able to be trusted.
Yeah.
At many levels. And so trusted to get the work done, trust you that your word is what you say your word is, that kind of thing. And then if you can put that package together and you go, hey, boss, can I get a little more freedom? Just instead of you looking over my shoulder, I work so much better. If I can just work out here alone, and then you just take a look back and see if I did it right or not. And consistently, if it's right, then usually the problem goes away. Usually.
Yeah.
But there's still those people that want to micromanage no matter. But usually, like I said, everybody's limited on time. So if they don't have to manage you, that's free time for them to do something else.
Yeah, I think that trust is a two-way street for sure. Like you were talking about being a kid, being a child. It's like if Dad tells me, if you spill the grape juice, I'll be upset, but that's not why I'm going to whoop your butt. But if you hide it, then I'm going to whoop your butt. And I'm not a parent, right? So I'm going to kind of lean on you to kind of, tell me whether I'm full of crap or not on this one. But if you're telling that to a kid, understand that it's not just about you gaining trust in them. It's them trusting you that you're going to follow through on something, whether it's positive or negative. If you say, come to me if something happens, and I've seen this way too many times with parents that have, it's been in the faith context for me. But they come to you and they ask you a question and you say, I'm open to questions. I'll do this, I'll do that. But then you get livid every time they come to you and they spill the grape juice. They're not going to come to tell you that they spilled the grape juice. And then if you don't follow through on the punishment side either, that's also not healthy. And I'm not really quite sure how to explain that part. Maybe you can kind of fill that gap. But, if you don't follow through on the punishment side, it almost is like, oh, I can get away with it because they're not going to do anything.
Right. One thing happened with me and, I'm going to use the term loose when I say I would paddle my girls. It wasn't, very aggressive. But when I told them I was going to paddle them because they acted up someplace when we get home, I would have to, by the time we get home, I was like, it wasn't that big of a deal. I don't want to paddle them. I don't want, whatever. But I would still line them up and touch with the paddle and touch them on the butt and say, listen, that's because I love you. I don't want to do it, but I still have to honor my word. Right. I still have, because I told you it was coming, I still have to do it. But no matter what, right? If you see, here's the thing: some of your best vocabulary is to say nothing at all. But if you say it, then you have to back it up.
Right.
And so, and that, that carries over to bigger and other things down the road. I'll tell you a story that has happened in my family. My daughter, I had some really nice stainless steel dog bowls, and they were really thick, good, solid, awesome bowls. And so they were clanging and clanging and clanging. I told my daughter, I said, if those pans clang one more time, I'm going to smash them with a hammer, knowing full well that they wouldn't clang anymore. And these are nice pans. Unfortunately, they clanged again. And I was like, oh, no, those are great pans. I don't want to smash them. But I had to smash them. I did. And it was terrible.
Oh, I did not see that one coming.
Yeah, and we all laughed about it to this day because they were such nice pans. It broke my heart. Man. But because I popped off and said I'm going to smash them, I had to smash them.
Yeah,
but I'll tell you what happened. Years and years later, they got computers and they got cell phones. And I told them, I said, if I find out you go someplace on those devices that you shouldn't, I will smash them. I promise you. And guess what? Now they're grown women. They tell me stories all the time how they wouldn't let somebody even put foul language in a song on them. Because you know why? Because all those years ago, I smashed their pants.
Wow.
And they knew if I said it was coming, I have a saying that I say sometimes, I heard it years ago. I usually say it about my father, but if my dad told you he was going to drive his truck through your front door in 20 minutes, you had about 15 minutes or so to get some stuff moved away from the door because he was coming through the door in 20 minutes.
Right.
And so if you say it, you can't be popping off. But if you say it, you need to mean it. Right. And in my case, when I popped off and I said I'm going to smash them pans, like I said, it broke my heart. They were good pans. But I did it. But they paid huge dividends later in life because my daughters knew that I was true to my word.
Yeah. Well, so that leads us to our last point here, and then we'll wrap it up. I'm gonna kind of give the floor here, and this is something that has personally been affecting me, and you actually brought it up, like the burning the candle at both ends and everything else. To any entrepreneur that's listening to this right now, or anybody that's really pushing themselves hard in the corporate world or really trying to push themselves for success, I want you to pay attention to the quote that I'm about to read and John's explanation of it, because I think that it's something that anybody that has a similar personality type to mine needs to hear, period. I have struggled with it a lot, especially in the last year since Apex has been growing, but the quote is, "He who arrives first does not always finish." And so, John, we'll just
take that one. That's a huge thing. And I'll tell you what happened. There was a gentleman, a friend I knew that grew a company to astronomical multi-millions. And there came a point where they knew that they had arrived. They made it. They finally made it. And then something happened in the mismanagement of that money, that overwhelming mounds of wealth, that they ended up losing it all. Mm. And I never forgot that, because he who arrives first does not always finish. Mm-hmm. And they spent much of the rest of their life struggling to ever try to recoup what they once had, and they didn't. Right. But they struggled, but there was a time where they were sitting all alone, clearly at the top of the mountain. And they said, their word, we've arrived, we've done it, we finally made it. And then things happened. Yep. And it went away. And I know two people that in my life that happened to, where they were just, at the very peak. I mean, one friend of mine was just getting ready to buy an airplane, and the rug got pulled up from underneath. and went back to not doing as well. So my point is so once you get there, it's hard to get there. Like I always say, it's harder to attain.
Mm-hmm.
It's far harder to maintain.
Amen.
Because once you get there and you go, man, look, check me out, and you're doing that Rocky Balboa thing at the top of the steps in Philadelphia, it doesn't mean that there's not somebody coming up just days later that's going to knock you right down, and then you go, well, how in the world did that happen? And so it's really a term of humility, of saying, listen, we're here, but don't
fight to keep it.
Yeah, don't get too comfortable.
Yeah, what is it? The wolf climbing the mountain is always hungrier than the wolf on top of the mountain, or the wolf on the hut is more focused than the wolf that is currently satisfied.
Yeah, well, I've never heard those, but they both make sense.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's the point. So just because you finally get your new Corvette and your new 5,000 square foot home and your bank account stuff and your 401k stuff and all that stuff, ooh man.
Yeah.
I have a dear friend of mine that has a lot of money, and you know what he does? He watches that money every night and again every morning, just to make sure it's all still there and where it's supposed to be. Because you never know, man. There's a lot of whores and thieves out there that would be more than happy to take it from you if given the opportunity.
Especially with the internet.
Right. And so just because you got there, so he who arrives first doesn't always finish. Some do, but there's no guarantees.
Yeah. And then for those of you that have been listening, this is the Deitz Playbook. And the whole reason why we're doing this is really, I love the fact that I'm seeing, Matt Mills. I'd like to say hi to you, Oliver. I'd like to say hi to you as well. There's some of these other people that are popping in. Okay, so it says here, Alexander seems to be, he's really engaging well tonight. He says, John, that was a wonderful quote, and your explanation was very helpful. I'll definitely be meditating on it.
Good.
So. That's exactly what we're hoping will happen, right?
Yeah, that's what I want to say. I want to say what I said. I think it was last time before. I'm nothing. I'm literally just an old hump that's trying to make it happen. But if whatever wisdom or lessons I have garnered over the years, and I got this, I'm giving this advice because it's advice I took. I always like listening to older men. And listen, because I was always said, I'm lazy enough. I don't need to drive through that pothole if I don't have to.
Right.
If there's a guy out there that drove into that pothole and goes, hey, John, come here, let me tell you something. Let me tell you a little story. And tells me how to avoid that, man, I'm all ears. I want to listen.
Yeah.
And so I'm not smarter than anyone listening. I'm just a guy that's been through a bunch. And if it helps, great. If you disagree, that's great. If you have a better idea, that's great. I'm just trying to help with whatever it is that I can help with, because I've got my chin skinned up so many times in my life that I would like to have the opportunity to help somebody else if I can. And so that's all it boils down to with me. So
yeah. Well, until next week, we are every Wednesday right now at 7 p.m. Today I was a little bit behind, and that's on me. I own that. I apologize. And so, Alex, thank you for your comments.
Yeah, sure.
I definitely appreciate that. That's what we're really hoping to do, is get people, if nothing more than to meditate on it. So, John, thanks again for coming by the studio. I know with all the craziness that's going on, we always appreciate you taking the time to come out to the Infex Communications Studios.
Can I just say one more thing, too?
Sure. I'll give you the floor.
There's people around you, I promise you, there's people around you today that is the weakest among us. Should the opportunity present itself, lift them up. You don't have to put them all the way up, but if you can lift them up just a little bit from where they are, they're better, you're better. It's just the right thing to do. And so just try to help where you can. There again, you don't have to mortgage to the bank to change somebody's life. But like I've always said too, if somebody just holds the door for someone that's carrying those boxes of printing paper and they can't just hold the door. That's so much more helpful to them. And so anyway, just if we can all just try to make somebody else's life a little better, it'll make a big difference over the term, I think. So.
All right, guys. Until next week, we appreciate you stopping by, and make sure that you are paying attention to these pieces of advice that we're giving you. Whether it's meditating on them, telling a friend, or if you know somebody that needs a question answered, or you have a question yourself that you need help with, go ahead and submit them. I definitely know that we enjoy when you guys talk to us. So the more that can happen, the better, for sure. When COVID's all over, maybe we can do a live event where you guys can ask John questions in person, and we can record that. But that'll be once everything is over and we're all able to kind of be together again. So until next time, I will look forward to hanging out with you again here on the Apex Communications Network on the show, the Deitz Playbook. If you want to listen to John's show, it's called the Word Class On. You can find the link inside the description of this podcast and inside of this live stream. The show that we plugged is an interview with Mr. Todd Blackledge. You can find that link to Spotify right there in the description, and I highly recommend, while you're anxiously anticipating next week's live stream, to go ahead and click on that and give it a listen. So